My name is Amanda, and I am 35 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington, a city of rain-washed streets, coffee shops on every corner, and neighborhoods that feel both familiar and distant, depending on who you stand beside. For me, Seattle has always been a place of contrasts. On one side, it's where I built my marriage, where my husband Robert and I raised our daughter Hannah, who is now 10 years old and the joy of my life. On the other side, it's the city where my mother, Melissa, still lives, and where my memories with her are far from joyful. I grew up in a family where love was unevenly divided. My father was the only one who ever made me feel seen. He wasn't perfect, but he loved me fiercely and made sure I knew that my worth didn't depend on pleasing anyone else. He passed away years ago, and with his passing, something inside my world crumbled. My mother, Melissa, filled the gap not with love, but with louder favoritism toward my younger brother, Anthony. She called him her golden child, a phrase she used without shame, and treated me as if I were merely an obligation. Melissa always compared us. Anthony was praised for the smallest achievement, while my successes were brushed aside as if they were accidents. When I got married, my mother barely acknowledged it. Yet when Anthony found his wife, Angela, and started a family, Melissa threw herself into their lives as if they were her only legacy. I tried to tell myself I could live with her indifference. But over the years, it wasn't just indifference. It became active disdain, sharp words, dismissive gestures, and a constant sense that I was unwelcome. Robert, my husband, saw through it all. He has always been my anchor, the steady presence who held me together when my mother's words cut too deep. He and I built a life together, determined to give Hannah the stability neither of us had growing up. Robert's parents, my in-laws, gave me a glimpse of what unconditional love from parents could feel like. They embraced me wholeheartedly, as if they knew I needed healing. Tragically, a car accident took both of them not long after our wedding. Their loss left a hole in our family that never closed, and yet the warmth they showed me remains one of my most treasured memories. Now, with Robert and Hannah, I try to focus on what I can control, creating a safe, loving home. But in the background, my mother's shadow lingers. Every encounter with Melissa feels like a test, every family gathering like a trap waiting to snap. If it weren't for Anthony, I wouldn't even see her. He insists on family unity, on pretending the cracks don't exist. Out of love for him, I often show up, smile politely, and hold my breath. For Hannah's sake, I try to keep the peace. But I've learned that peace is fragile when one person is determined to destroy it. And the day I'll never forget, the day my daughter was accused and attacked, proved just how far Melissa was willing to go. Growing up, I often wondered what it would feel like to be Melissa's favorite. To have her eyes light up when I walked into the room, or to hear her boast about me to relatives the way she bragged endlessly about Anthony. But those moments never came. Instead, she would nitpick, criticize, or worse, ignore me altogether. The silence sometimes stung more than the words. Anthony, on the other hand, couldn't make a wrong move in her eyes. If he got a B in school, it was celebrated. If I brought home an A, she would remind me that I still wasn't as bright as my brother. Anthony grew into that role comfortably. He didn't gloat about it, but he also didn't fight it. It's hard to blame him entirely. When you're handed constant approval, you learn to expect it. His wife, Angela, is kind and tries her best to stay out of the family drama. She treats me respectfully, and she's a devoted mother to Logan, their son. I've never sensed malice from her, only the occasional discomfort of someone caught between her husband's loyalty to his mother and the unfair treatment she witnesses. Then there is Hannah, my sweet, curious, and bright daughter. She is the best thing I've ever done in my life. She is talkative, imaginative, and endlessly kind. She loves drawing rainbows and animals, and she fills our home with laughter. Yet around Melissa, she grows quiet. I've noticed how her shoulders tense when Melissa is near, as if she can feel the weight of disapproval pressing down on her small frame. Hannah doesn't fully understand why her grandmother doesn't treat her with the same affection she shows Logan. She only knows that she is somehow less in Melissa's eyes. Robert hates seeing it. Many times, he has urged me to cut ties completely. But I have held on, perhaps out of loyalty to Anthony, perhaps because some part of me still wanted Melissa to change. It's a strange burden to carry, wanting to shield your child, but also hoping, foolishly, that your own mother might one day soften. The truth is, Melissa has never softened. Every gathering is the same pattern. Logan receives praise, attention, and affection. Hannah gets a stiff pat on the shoulder, or worse, Melissa's sharp tongue disguised as correction. The words echo in my head, "Don't be clumsy like your mother," or "Why can't you sit still like Logan?" Each comment digs at me and wounds Hannah at the same time. Still, I keep showing up, telling myself that Anthony shouldn't suffer for Melissa's bitterness. He loves both his sister and his mother, even if he doesn't see the cracks as clearly as I do. He wants his family intact, the illusion of harmony preserved. And I, against my better judgment, have played along. But when Logan's 5th birthday approached, I felt a chill settle over me. Something told me Melissa wouldn't let the day pass without reminding me, once again, of where she believes I belong in this family, on the outside. When Anthony first told me about Logan's 5th birthday party, his voice carried the kind of excitement that only a parent can understand. "Amanda, you have to come. Hannah will love it. We've booked the backyard. There'll be games, balloons, and a big cake. It'll mean a lot if you and Robert are there." I smiled, partly because I love my nephew and partly because Anthony always tries to pull me closer into a family that rarely feels like mine. But deep inside, I knew there was one obstacle, Melissa. Sure enough, within days, I heard from her. She called, her tone sharp and cold. "Why should you even come? You'll just make things awkward. It's Anthony's family now. You're only going to bring your problems and your daughter." She said daughter, as if Hannah were some sort of burden rather than a child. My chest tightened, but before I could respond, Anthony intervened. "Mom, enough," I heard him say firmly over the phone. "Amanda is my sister. Robert is family. Hannah is family. They're coming, and that's final." His voice, rarely raised against Melissa, held a conviction that surprised me. Melissa was furious, but she didn't argue further. Instead, she muttered something about not wanting trouble and hung up. Still, I knew her well enough to understand what silence meant. She wasn't giving in. She was plotting. My stomach churned at the thought. Robert, ever the realist, caught the change in my mood. "Amanda, do we really have to go? You know how your mother is. Hannah doesn't deserve to sit through another of her cold stares or sharp words." He wasn't wrong. Everything in me wanted to shield Hannah from the inevitable storm. But then I thought of Logan. Sweet, bright Logan, who adored Hannah and always begged to see her. He deserved a birthday surrounded by everyone who loved him. So I made the decision we would go. Not for Melissa, not even for Anthony, but for Logan and for Hannah, who deserved to know her cousin's joy. Still, I couldn't shake the unease that Melissa's silence left behind. On the morning of the party, I helped Hannah pick out a cheerful yellow dress. She twirled in front of the mirror, her braids swinging, and asked, "Do you think Grandma will be nice today?" The question stabbed me. I forced a smile. "I hope so, sweetheart. But remember, no matter what anyone says, you are perfect just the way you are." She hugged me, satisfied with my answer, but my heart was unsettled. I knew Melissa didn't want us there. The only reason we were invited was because Anthony had demanded it. That truth alone was enough to make me dread what lay ahead. I didn't know then that Melissa's plan was already forming, that she would use Logan's birthday, a day of joy and innocence, as the stage for her cruelty. Seattle's gray skies parted just enough that afternoon to let the sun shine on Anthony's backyard. The air smelled of fresh grass and grilled food, and balloons in bright reds and blues swayed with the breeze. Logan's laughter rang out as he darted across the yard with his friends, his energy filling the space with warmth. Angela had outdone herself with the decorations, streamers, party hats, and a long table lined with chips, sandwiches, and the centerpiece, a two-tiered birthday cake with cartoon characters hand-drawn in frosting. At first glance, it looked like the perfect family gathering. Guests mingled, chatting with drinks in hand. Children's voices carried over the fence as they ran between games set up in the yard. Robert and I stood together, exchanging polite smiles with distant relatives we hadn't seen in years. For a moment, it almost felt normal, almost peaceful. But Melissa was there too. She sat at a corner table, her posture stiff, her eyes darting toward me and Hannah with a sharpness that cut even across the laughter. She spoke animatedly with Angela's parents, but I noticed how her smile faded every time she glanced in my direction. It wasn't subtle, it was a warning. Hannah, oblivious at first, threw herself into play with Logan. They chased each other around the balloon arch, giggling as if the world couldn't touch them. Seeing her joy, my heart lifted. Robert squeezed my hand. "She's happy," he whispered. "That's what matters." I nodded, though a shadow in my chest kept me from fully believing it. Angela approached me then, her face kind but weary, as if she too felt the strain of Melissa's presence. "I'm glad you came, Amanda," she said softly. "Logan's been talking about Hannah for weeks." I smiled genuinely. Angela wasn't part of the problem. She had always been decent to me. If anything, she was caught in the crossfire of a family that carried wounds she didn't create. Anthony buzzed around, making sure the guests had drinks, his son was safe, and the games stayed lively. He had a way of masking tension with charm, and today was no different. But I caught his worried glance toward Melissa once or twice, as if he knew she was a storm waiting to break. When the time came for cake, everyone gathered near the long table. Logan climbed onto a chair, beaming as everyone sang, "Happy Birthday." Hannah clapped the loudest, her smile wide and unguarded. I leaned close to Robert and whispered, "Maybe it'll be okay today." He gave me a doubtful look, but said nothing. In that moment, with candles glowing, children laughing, and the air full of celebration, I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that Melissa would not ruin this day. But deep down, I knew her silence wasn't peace. It was the quiet before a storm. The laughter from the cake cutting had barely faded when a small ripple of commotion stirred near the gift table. Anthony patted his pockets, his cheerful expression slipping into confusion. "Has anyone seen my phone?" he asked, his voice light at first, almost casual. Guests paused, some shaking their heads, others glancing at nearby chairs and tables. Within minutes, his concern grew. "I swear I had it just a few minutes ago," he muttered, scanning the table where the presents were stacked. Angela joined him, sifting through tissue paper and gift bags with furrowed brows. A few guests offered to check the ground, bending to look under chairs and around the yard. The easy flow of the party slowed as the search became more focused. I didn't think much of it at first. Phones get misplaced at parties all the time. But then I noticed Melissa. She had been quiet for most of the celebration, sitting like a coiled spring. Now her eyes narrowed, following the movement of the children, particularly Hannah. My stomach sank. Anthony's voice sharpened with frustration. "It's not here. I had it right before we started the cake." A murmur passed through the crowd, that uncomfortable hum of suspicion beginning to brew. And that was when Melissa stood. Her chair scraped against the patio with a screech. She lifted her chin, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. "I know exactly what happened," she declared, her eyes locked on Hannah. "She took it." The yard went silent. For a moment, even the children stopped moving. Every head turned toward my daughter. Hannah froze, her small hands clutching the hem of her yellow dress. Her eyes went wide, disbelief written across her face. "I didn't," she blurted, her voice high and trembling. "I didn't take anything." Melissa pressed on, relentless. "Don't lie. You were near the table. You've always been sneaky, just like your mother. Admit it." Heat rushed to my face. My pulse pounded in my ears. Robert stiffened beside me, his jaw tightening. Hannah looked at me, pleading, her eyes wet with tears she was holding back. "Mom, I didn't. I promise." "I believe you, sweetheart," I whispered, pulling her close. But Melissa's voice rose again, harsher, louder, as if she wanted the entire neighborhood to hear. "She's a thief, just like I've always said. This is who she is." Gasps spread among the guests. Some looked shocked, others uncomfortable, shifting on their feet. Anthony stepped forward, his face pale. "Mom, don't," he began, but Melissa cut him off with a raised hand, her focus never leaving Hannah. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about a phone. This was about Melissa's need to humiliate me, and now, she was using my child as her weapon. Hannah's cheeks flushed crimson as all eyes landed on her. She shook her head furiously, braids swinging, her voice breaking under the weight of Melissa's accusation. "I didn't steal it. I don't even know where Uncle Anthony's phone is." Her words should have been enough. The honesty in her trembling tone was undeniable. But Melissa wasn't interested in truth. She leaned forward, eyes blazing, her hand gripping the edge of the table as though drawing strength from her fury. "Liar," she spat. "You're just like your mother, dishonest, ungrateful. You think you can waltz in here and ruin everything? Not today." I tried to push through the circle of stunned relatives, Robert at my side, but we had been standing a little too far off, distracted in a conversation with another guest. That distance, that single, foolish step away, gave Melissa her opening. Hannah stumbled back as Melissa's voice rose again, cutting through the hum of whispers. "Admit it," Melissa shouted. "Confess what you did." "I didn't," Hannah cried, her voice trembling as tears welled in her eyes. And then it happened. In one swift, shocking motion, Melissa grabbed the heavy cake stand from the center of the table, the same stand that just minutes earlier had held Logan's birthday cake. With a snarl, she swung it and brought it down toward Hannah's head. The sound was sickening. The weight of the stand connected, and Hannah's small body crumpled to the floor. Gasps and screams erupted around us. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered against the patio, but I barely registered the sound. "Hannah!" I screamed, my voice tearing from my throat as Robert and I pushed through the stunned crowd. My legs felt like they were wading through concrete, every second an eternity, until I could reach her. Hannah lay on the ground, dazed, her little hands twitching as if she didn't know what had just happened. A thin line of red seeped from her forehead, trailing down her temple. Her eyes fluttered, as though the world were spinning around her. I fell to my knees, pulling her into my arms. My vision blurred with tears as I pressed my hand gently to her wound. "Stay with me, baby. Stay with me," I whispered desperately. Robert's voice roared over the chaos, steady and commanding. "Call 911. Now." He was already pulling out his own phone, his fingers shaking but determined. Guests scattered, some rushing toward the gate to wave down help, others standing frozen in shock. Anthony stood motionless, his face ashen, his mouth half open as though words had failed him. Angela clutched Logan, shielding him from the horror unfolding just a few feet away. Melissa, meanwhile, stood tall, chest heaving, the cake stand still in her hand. Her eyes darted wildly, as though she hadn't fully grasped what she had done. Then, with chilling calm, she dropped the stand onto the table, the clang echoing in the stunned silence. "She deserved it," she hissed. "Thieves need to be taught a lesson." In that moment, I knew everything had changed. Whatever fragile tie I had clung to with my mother had been shattered. I held Hannah tighter, my tears falling onto her hair, and I whispered a promise I intended to keep. "I won't let her hurt you ever again." The minutes that followed felt like a blur, and yet stretched into forever. I knelt on the ground, cradling Hannah while Robert barked into his phone, his voice steady but urgent as he gave our address to the 911 operator. Around us, the party had dissolved into chaos. Some guests hovered close, torn between helping and not knowing what to do. Others backed away, hands over their mouths in shock. Anthony finally snapped out of his frozen state. He crouched beside me, his face pale with horror. "Amanda, I didn't know she'd..." His words faltered, guilt choking his voice. Angela held Logan tight, rocking him as he whimpered at the sight of his cousin lying injured on the ground. Melissa stood a few feet away, her arms crossed as if she were the victim in all this. Her eyes flashed with a cold defiance. "If she had just confessed, this wouldn't have happened," she said flatly. My stomach turned at her lack of remorse. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Relief surged through me like air to drowning lungs. Robert's hand found my shoulder briefly before he rose to meet the responders at the front gate. 2 uniformed police officers and a pair of paramedics rushed in, their presence instantly shifting the atmosphere from panic to procedure. "Step back, please," one of the paramedics instructed as they knelt beside Hannah. I reluctantly let go so they could work. They checked her vitals, gently palpated her head, and spoke to her in calm voices. Hannah whimpered but tried to answer when they asked her name. Seeing her fight to stay present broke me, but it also gave me hope. "She needs to be transported for further evaluation," one paramedic said firmly. "Possible concussion. We'll stabilize and move her now." As they worked, one of the police officers approached me and Robert. "Ma'am, sir, can you tell me what happened here?" His notepad was already out, pen poised. Before I could answer, Melissa interjected, her voice sharp. "That girl stole Anthony's phone. She needed to be disciplined." I was correcting her behavior. I spun on her, my grief igniting into fury. "You call this discipline? You nearly killed my child." My voice cracked, but the truth in it hung heavy in the air. The officer gave me a quick nod. "We'll be speaking to everyone here, ma'am. Don't worry." The paramedics lifted Hannah carefully onto a stretcher, securing her head and strapping her in. I rushed to her side, gripping her hand as Robert walked beside us. Hannah's eyes were half closed, her lips pale, but her small fingers squeezed mine faintly. "Mom," she whispered weakly. "I didn't do it." Tears blurred my vision as I kissed her forehead. "I know, baby. I know you didn't. And the truth will come out." As the stretcher was wheeled toward the ambulance, Robert turned to the officers, his voice hard. "She attacked my daughter. Arrest her." His finger pointed directly at Melissa. The officer gave a short nod. "We're investigating now, sir. We'll get statements from everyone." I climbed into the back of the ambulance beside Hannah, while Robert followed close behind. The last image I saw before the doors closed was Melissa, standing rigid in the yard, her face twisted in anger as the police closed in. The ambulance sped through Seattle streets, its siren wailing above the rain-slicked roads. I held Hannah's hand tightly, whispering reassurances while the paramedics monitored her vitals. Robert's car followed close behind, headlights flashing as if he could will the traffic to part faster. My heart ached at the sight of my daughter strapped to monitors, but even in my panic, I knew the truth had to surface, and soon. Back at Anthony's house, the police wasted no time. Witnesses were separated, statements taken. Guests described the accusation, Melissa's outburst, and the shocking moment when she had grabbed the cake stand. Anthony, still shaken, explained that his phone had vanished right before the chaos. He defended Hannah, insisting she'd had no reason to touch it. Melissa, however, doubled down. "She's a liar and a thief," she told the officers, her voice cold and unyielding. "She stole that phone. I was teaching her a lesson. You should be thanking me." The officers exchanged looks, unimpressed by her claim. One calmly asked to search her belongings. Melissa scoffed but reluctantly handed over her purse, muttering about wasted time. It didn't take long. Inside, beneath a folded handkerchief and a bundle of receipts, the missing phone glinted. Anthony's phone. The officer held it up, his face impassive. "Sir, is this your device?" Anthony stepped forward, his voice heavy with disbelief. "Yes, that's mine." A wave of gasps swept through the remaining guests. Angela covered her mouth, tears brimming as she clutched Logan closer. Anthony's face turned crimson, a mixture of shame and anger at what his mother had done. "Mom, how could you?" he whispered. Melissa's face drained of color. For the first time that evening, she faltered. That's not possible," she stammered, but the evidence was undeniable. The lead officer straightened, his voice firm. "Melissa Johnson, you are under arrest for child abuse, assault with a household object, and filing a false accusation. You have the right to remain silent." His words cut through the stunned silence as he read her rights. Melissa's protests grew louder as the handcuffs clicked into place. "This is a mistake. I was protecting my family. She's lying. Amanda put it there. But no one believed her anymore. The truth was visible in every shaken face, in the heavy silence of her own son, who turned his back on her as the officers led her away. For me, even though I wasn't there to witness it firsthand, the story reached me at the hospital within the hour. Robert walked into Hannah's room, his eyes tired but burning with resolve. "They found the phone, Amanda," he said quietly. "It was in her purse. They arrested her on the spot." Relief washed over me, mingling with grief. My daughter had been hurt, but justice had already begun to turn its wheels. I kissed Hannah's forehead as she rested against her pillow, whispering to myself as much as to her. The truth always comes out. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the hospital room as Hannah lay tucked under white sheets, her small frame dwarfed by the bed. Machines beeped softly in the background, each sound a reminder of the trauma she had endured. I sat at her side, clutching her hand, tracing small circles on her skin with my thumb. Robert stood near the window, his arms crossed, his expression a mask of both fury and sorrow. The doctors had completed a full evaluation. A CT scan showed no internal bleeding, though the blow from the cake stand had caused a concussion and a nasty gash that required stitches. The relief I felt was indescribable, relief that she was alive, that her injuries, while painful, were not permanent. But alongside that relief burned a rage I had never known before. Robert came to my side, resting a steady hand on my shoulder. "She'll recover," he said softly, though his jaw remained tight. "But we can't let this go, Amanda. We can't let your mother walk away after what she's done." I nodded. My heart still reeled from the moment Hannah whispered, "I didn't do it, Mom," even as blood ran down her forehead. My daughter had been more concerned with clearing her name than with her own pain. That thought alone hardened my resolve. Later that evening, a police officer visited the hospital to take my official statement. I recounted everything in painstaking detail: Melissa's favoritism, her hostility toward me, the phone accusation, Hannah's denial, and the violent strike with the cake stand. My voice trembled, but I did not falter. Robert added his account, his words precise, his anger evident but controlled. When the officer left, Anthony called. His voice was heavy, weighed down with shame. "Amanda, I don't know how to apologize. I never imagined Mom could do something like this. Angela and I are horrified. Please believe me, we had nothing to do with it." I closed my eyes, holding the phone tightly. "I know, Anthony. But this has changed everything." He didn't argue. He knew I was right. That night, as Hannah finally drifted into an exhausted sleep, Robert sat beside me and spoke with quiet determination. "Tomorrow I'll call a lawyer. We'll press charges. Melissa needs to face the full weight of the law. For Hannah's sake, for ours, and maybe even for Anthony's family. Enough is enough." I looked at my husband, steady, unwavering, my anchor, and felt a surge of gratitude. "Yes," I whispered, my eyes on Hannah. "We'll make sure she never hurts our daughter again." The days after the attack blurred together, filled with hospital visits, whispered reassurances to Hannah, and meetings with lawyers. Robert moved quickly, contacting a reputable attorney who specialized in child protection and domestic assault cases. Sitting in the lawyer's office, I felt a mix of dread and determination. It was one thing to survive my mother's cruelty, but it was another to bring her to justice. For Hannah, I had no choice. The lawyer laid everything out clearly. Melissa's charges would include child abuse, assault with a dangerous household object, and filing a false accusation. Each charge was serious, but combined, they painted a picture of deliberate cruelty. With the police report, eyewitness accounts, medical records, and the recovered phone, the lawyer explained, we have a very strong case. Court proceedings began within weeks. Walking into the courthouse for the first time was surreal. The air inside felt heavy, as though soaked with the weight of countless family tragedies. Hannah stayed home with a trusted friend while Robert and I attended the hearings. When Melissa was led into the courtroom in handcuffs, her eyes found mine. There was no remorse in her stare, only bitterness, as though I had betrayed her by daring to hold her accountable. The prosecutor presented the case with precision. Photos of Hannah's stitched wound, the paramedics' reports, the testimony of multiple guests, all painted a damning picture. Several witnesses described how Melissa had falsely accused Hannah and then struck her. One guest even recalled her chilling words, "She deserved it." I took the stand, my palms damp with sweat. Speaking under oath, I told the court about the years of favoritism, the way Melissa idolized Anthony and diminished me. I explained how that cruelty had extended to Hannah, culminating in violence. My voice trembled at times, but Robert's steady gaze from the bench gave me strength. Melissa's defense attorney tried to argue she had acted in a moment of frustration, claiming she had no intent to cause serious harm. But the evidence was undeniable. The recovered phone in her purse dismantled her credibility completely. The jury's faces hardened as the truth became clear. This wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated act to humiliate me by targeting my daughter. The judge delivered the verdict with solemn gravity. Melissa was found guilty on all counts. Her sentence, 10 years in state prison. In addition, a permanent restraining order was issued, forbidding her from ever contacting me, Robert, or Hannah again. As the gavel struck, I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't joy. How could there be joy in seeing your own mother sent to prison? It was something else, something heavier but cleaner, relief. Justice had been served, and for the first time, I felt the shadow of my mother's control lifting from our lives. Robert squeezed my hand as we walked out of the courtroom together. "It's over," he said. "She can't hurt us anymore." And for once, I believed him. Even after the verdict, I carried a storm inside me. You don't watch your own mother sentenced to 10 years in prison without feeling torn apart. For nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had come to this. But every time those doubts crept in, I only had to glance at Hannah's scar, faint but permanent, to remind myself, Melissa had chosen this path. She had crossed a line no mother, no grandmother, should ever cross. Anthony called once more, his voice thick with shame. "Amanda, I don't know how to fix this. She's my mom, but what she did, he couldn't finish." I told him quietly that I didn't blame him or Angela, but I also couldn't pretend things would ever be the same. The restraining order meant legal distance, but the emotional distance was already cemented. My brother's loyalty to her had kept him blind for so long. Maybe now he saw the truth, but it was too late for me to trust that closeness again. Angela, to her credit, sent a message of support. She apologized for the pain, insisted she believed Hannah from the very beginning, and said she hoped one day the children could play together again without shadows hanging over them. I appreciated her words, though I knew the path to that kind of peace was long and uncertain. At home, the real work was helping Hannah heal. The physical wound mended quickly, but the emotional one lingered. She became quieter at school, hesitant around adults she didn't fully trust. Robert and I enrolled her in counseling, where a kind therapist encouraged her to draw, to talk through her fears, and to reclaim her voice. Slowly, I saw glimpses of my vibrant little girl returning. The laughter, the sketches taped proudly to her bedroom wall, the way she curled up beside me with a book and whispered, "I love you, Mom." Robert, steady as ever, carried me through my own turmoil. He reminded me that we were building something different, a home where Hannah would never question her worth, where love wasn't conditional. He became my mirror when guilt tried to tell me I had destroyed my family. "You didn't destroy it," he said one night, holding me close. "You saved ours." And he was right. For the first time, I understood that protecting Hannah meant more than soothing her tears. It meant standing up to the one person I had feared all my life. It meant choosing my daughter over the toxic ties of the past. Melissa's prison sentence wasn't just punishment. It was a line drawn in stone. She no longer had power over me, over Hannah, over the family Robert and I had created. That freedom was painful, but it was also liberating. A year later, Seattle's skies were just as gray and damp as ever, but inside our home the air was filled with warmth. Streamers hung across the living room, Balloons floated lazily against the ceiling, and the smell of Hannah's favorite chocolate cake drifted from the kitchen. She was turning 11, and this time her birthday wasn't shadowed by fear or accusations. It was a celebration of her life, her resilience, and the promise that she would always be safe. Our closest friends gathered, people who had stood by us through the trial and aftermath. Robert beamed as he lit the candles, his steady hands reflecting the anchor he had been for both of us. Hannah grinned from ear to ear, her braids bouncing as she leaned toward the cake. "Make a wish," I whispered, my voice soft but steady. She squeezed her eyes shut, then blew out the candles in one strong breath. The room erupted in cheers, claps, and laughter. In that moment, I saw not the child who had once been accused and struck down, but a young girl standing taller, braver, and stronger. Later, as guests mingled and children played games, I found myself watching Hannah dance with her friends, her laughter ringing out like music. My heart swelled. She had endured something no child should, but she had come through it. Not broken, but bright. Robert slipped his arm around my shoulders. "She looks happy," he said quietly. "She is," I replied, leaning into him. "And she's safe. That's all I ever wanted." We hadn't seen Melissa since the sentencing. The restraining order was permanent, the prison sentence a decade long. Sometimes I wondered if she thought about us, if she regretted what she had done. But those thoughts no longer controlled me. She was no longer a force in our lives, no longer the shadow looming over my every step. Anthony and Angela sent a small gift for Hannah, a sketchbook and colored pencils. Their note was brief but thoughtful, wishing her joy and creativity in the year ahead. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. A small reminder that not every bond had to be broken, even if it would never be the same. As the evening wound down and Hannah hugged me tightly, thanking me for the best birthday ever, I realized how much had changed. I had once been a daughter desperate for her mother's approval. Now I was a mother who had chosen her daughter above all else. I looked at Hannah, her eyes glowing with hope, and made a silent promise. She would never doubt her worth again. Not as long as I lived. "My name is Amanda," I thought to myself, and this is the story of how I found my strength, not in my mother's love, but in protecting my daughter's future. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more powerful stories like this, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more content every week.